Just wondering if you could cover any pointers on remaining calm at the dentist for root canal treatment. I'm wondering how I'm going to keep it together for an hour. Sometimes I keep it together for a certain length of time, and then when I'm about halfway through, I'm just dying to get out the door, but no, I can't. How do you keep it together for the second half when you've done about as much deep breathing as you can manage? Good question. So there are two, I suppose, potential goals when it comes to working with these types of experiences. One is to try and change how we're feeling, and the other is to be able to work better with how we're feeling. And, often both of these are a good idea. A little bit of work with each can be helpful. But the one thing I think we can always default to, if you're ever in doubt, is simply presence. Because while it is true that a certain amount of practice and preparation, a certain amount of technique might make you feel better to begin with, it is also true that it's perfectly possible to feel uncomfortable in a given moment. And one of the issues in those moments, ironically, is the need not to feel uncomfortable in that moment. Because, if you're going into a situation like that and you've set yourself up in order to feel good, that's great. Of course, positive reinforcement is definitely important. However, if there's a need to not feel uncomfortable, to not have worrying thoughts or sensations, that can be a bit of an issue. And this comes up in so many examples. Going to the dentist is a very good example of it. I also do work as well, helping women around childbirth, work around various procedures as well, sometimes where anesthetics aren't appropriate or possible. And like the example of childbirth is a very good example of it. Sometimes people go into it thinking, oh my God, this has to be a problem. And that, of course, is unfortunate because, if there's too much stress to begin with, well, then tension has been created, which isn't really helping things. However, equally problematic can be sometimes a person who goes into the experience thinking, not just this is going to be great, this has to be great. There's a pressure attached to it. And that's, I think, the thing we need to watch out for. So I think a nice framing, for all of this to begin with is a recognition that you are well. And there's nothing that you have to do. You can certainly work with creating an even more pleasant experience. Why wouldn't you do that? That's absolutely a good idea. But there's no great pressure on you to make the experience a certain way. It can be as it needs to be. And you can feel fabulous throughout the experience, or you can feel a bit uncomfortable. But even if you're a bit uncomfortable, it's okay to be uncomfortable. You don't need to take an additional pressure now you're uncomfortable, but you're also uncomfortable by being uncomfortable. And then there's an extra layer of effort in that moment that's been placed upon you. That's not fair on you. So it's to give yourself that room to breathe. The other thing you can do with these feelings, and so if we take that example of you've done pretty well, you're having a pretty good experience, but about halfway through, the mind starts to think, here, I've had enough of this. You can also choose how you interpret and how you frame that feeling. So you might take it as a warning sign and become agitated by it. Or you might take it as a sign that your mind is saying, actually, that means you're over halfway through and you're doing really, really well. That means you are getting closer to the end of the experience. And the other thing you might do is have an attitude of a certain curiosity around the sensation. You might say, okay, that's a thought that's entering my mind. That's okay. Just to be aware of that. And to use it as a cue, a trigger essentially, to loosen your body in that moment. Maybe it's a reminder that you've done good work over the previous half hour, but maybe you've done a bit too much work. Maybe you've done enough work. Maybe it's time to just really loosen and fall into the present moment. To start to notice the sensations that are there. It's a bit like if you're in a gallery looking at art. You're able to be present with the beautiful landscapes and the very pleasant and pretty imagery that you see in front of you. But you're also maybe able to look at some art about some kind of challenging topics as well, maybe some kind of dark works in front of you. And just to be with that and to just observe that too. Might make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. That's kind of its function at that moment. So equally, if your mind is bringing up any sense of worry and concern, just noticing that and recognizing that that's its function. It's designed to keep you safe. So you can, if you want, slightly reassure yourself in that moment if a little bit of a reframe is needed. But probably at that point, if you've already done well over the earlier part of the session, it's probably enough to just fall into that sense of being present and just allow yourself that room to be. So beforehand, a certain amount of positive visualization is really useful here as well. So if there are particular moments that have been challenging, a nice thing to do is to stop and just to imagine ahead as to how you want the experience to be. And what you might do is you might picture that, beforehand, you're feeling good, working with whatever feelings are there well. Maybe during, particularly at the start, using some breathing techniques, being a little bit more present. And just enjoying that space to breathe, and maybe using some visualization during. These are the two main modes of dealing with discomfort. One is just imagining something else that's pleasant if your attention isn't needed in the moment. Or the other direction then is bringing your attention actually back to the experience and just being with it, but not having a hyper response to it. And that happens where you're not just perceiving what's going on, but you're adding a narrative or a story to it. This is a problem. This is a challenge. You're adding in these extra layers. So you're coming back to, no, this is just sensation. This is experience. And it's interesting, you don't need to go this far, but some people are masochists. They pay good money for pain, humiliation, and suffering. So it just goes to show the room that's there for interpreting sensations in different ways. Again, you don't need to glorify pain. That's not necessary. But it just does go to show what we're capable of as human beings when it comes to interpretation. So being able to take a bit of room to say, no, aside from the narratives here, let's just get back to core experience. So if you're doing a little bit of visualization beforehand, you can imagine, that all going well and you're in a good place. But then if the mind does wander, you can picture yourself responding positively to that as well, using that as a good cue and a good sign. Yeah, that means I'm doing well. Yeah, I look forward to this being finished. But in a weird way, I'm also kind of interested in the experience. This is an opportunity to be mindful and present and with whatever's there, not allowing the narratives to become too dominant. Instead, getting back to that breathing space of just being where you are, whatever might be happening. Like the captain of the ship. Might be beautiful weather or might be rather stormy. But either way, you're sailing. And you're not feeling the need to be anywhere other than where you are. It doesn't mean there isn't somewhere you'd like to arrive at in your sailing. Of course there is. And likewise, that's why we have any of these procedures or engage in these experiences, because they're ultimately beneficial. They're a part of health and wellness. So you're kind of embracing that in a holistic way and seeing it as being that healthy experience as it is. So that framing typically makes a big difference. And even if it only makes a small difference, just feeling incrementally better about the experience, rather than going into it thinking, halfway through there's going to be a problem. Instead you go, no, halfway through, it's just a continuation of the first half. I'm good and I'm well within myself. And I don't need to win at this. It's enough for me to just be. I'm safe. I'm in good care. I'm well. So just even feeling that way a little bit more makes your body a little bit more relaxed. Puts your system in a better place. So you do feel a little bit better. And then it tends to go better. And then, of course, your expectations for the next time are even better too. If you found this valuable, do like, subscribe, and share. And what's your experience? Do you have any questions or topic suggestions? You can contribute in the comments, on social media using #bodymindself, or on jfl.com.